is another day in the MLB, another day here of DFS, and we have all the information you need to get you to today's MLB lock for, of course, another day on Awesemo.com's Live Before Lock show. I'm Chris Spags, joined once again by a man who you want as your co-pilot, and he's dressed for the part today more than ever. His name is Alex Baker. You know him as Awesemo. How are you doing, Alex?
Doing good, man. Our whole new thing is being a wingman, draft wingman, you could say. So I'm ready to roll here.
You are the full wingman. Of course, the draft wingman is a part of our fantasy football offerings at Awesemo.com. Go to Awesemo.com right now. Check out the tabs up top. We have a fantasy football package that's launched. A lot of the content there is still free, but you can check it out. It's got the best data that Alex himself put together in his quest to make you a better fantasy player and across DFS and season-long fantasy football. There's a lot of tools available for you, including that draft wingman app that's hitting soon, and it's going to look as fresh as Alex does right now in your life, helping you make all the picks you need in your drafts. And Alex, what can people find if they go check out that fantasy football product that you're clearly so proud of that you're branding yourself as it?
Well, I mean, we've been working really hard on covering you guys for your drafts because it's a lot of fun to draft with your buddies. But you know what's even more fun, Spags, man, is completely annihilating them. Like, I want to make sure that you're making the right picks so that by week 10, your friends have given up all hope and you can just coast the championship.
Yeah, hey, that's always the goal. And of course, there are some special deals we have in concert with FFPC, where if you do play on there, get yourself a $35 credit that'll pay for your Awesemo draft kit. So just make sure you're taking advantage of all the things that we have at Awesemo.com and the fantasy football product. Tom, Alex, all the guys behind the scenes, Lofty, have put a lot of time in. And of course, all of our developers as well, putting a lot of stuff together for you guys to be better at fantasy football the same way that we try to do everything here for DFS. So make sure you are checking that at Awesemo.com and take advantage of that FFPC deal, which you can find the details of at that fantasy football tab at Awesemo.com up top. Very easy to find. And of course, this show, actually, Jordan, do we have the correct logo here? Didn't we switch to? I think we're sponsored by Yahoo. Of course, we love our friends over at SuperDraft, but we are a Yahoo daily fantasy sports show for MLB, and it is the most trusted name in fantasy sports. And Yahoo DFS now includes CSV uploads and CSV edit features for those looking to play multiple lineups, something a lot of the people out there have been looking for. Yahoo listened, and they brought it to you. So claim up to $30 in Yahoo Sports reward points by signing up and using promo code Awesemo, AWESEMO. It'll help you make better choices. And again, those YSRPs, your old pal Lofty's been telling you, it's going to make you a baller overnight with those YSRPs. So play on Yahoo. And again, if you're a mass multi-enterer, you can play some CSV lineups to make your life easier. And Alex can attest that is a very important part of the game. But let's get right to it here. We got some stuff to hit on, some chalk pitchers, some chalk stacks to hit on. Projections also working now after, I think, some issues a little bit earlier. So if you missed them before, have no fear. They're up and ready for you. And Alex, I'm just going to ask you here because I have to update for ownership, but some key pitching on the slate. I would think Max Scherzer is the guy that people are going to make that decision point on early. But who do you consider the key pitcher to talk about here first?
Yeah, probably Scherzer. I mean, he's an exceptional pitcher, so his strikeouts are definitely a game changer in fantasy. However, I mean, the last start, he went out and he threw one inning. So we were fortunate as DFS players to avoid that one because it was on the early slate. But that's a big question mark. Although in his other two starts this year, he's been fine. So he's definitely a big decision right off the top of how you're going to go about building a lineup today.
Is there any way at all that you think you can get to the Coors game, which of course Coors is always a thing we'll talk about because the hitting there is sweet as you can find in MLB. Do you think there's a way that you can get to either side of the Coors game and Scherzer in a lineup without feeling absolutely terrible about what you're building?
Yeah, I don't think you need to force things like that. As you're saying, if you do that, your lineup's going to it's either going to be the same as a lot of people because it's just like trying too hard to like fit everything in, or you're just going to have bad batters from that game. So, I mean, there's some cheap Coors bats like tonight, the Diamondbacks leadoff hitter, Andy Young at 3,900. I mean, that's a guy that is going to really pop. And I think that if you're just trying too hard to fit in expensive pitching with those bats, then you're probably going to tie a lot.
No, that makes sense. And we'll talk more about the hitting in the back half of the show. But of course, we do have some other pitchers to talk about. Some guys a little better price here. But first, we have to ask you guys to hit that like button because we could talk about pitchers here. But the bad news is if we don't get enough likes, they're all going to get blown up today. That's how MLB DFS works. So help us out. Hit that like button down below right now. And another pitcher today is going to be pretty well owned. Mike Minor going against the Seattle squad that has not offered up a ton in terms of, I guess they've blown up some stacks, but generally on paper, not looking the best. A lot of guys striking out in the lineup, though. Maybe a little less than people might think. 4 guys under league average or over league average, in terms of strikeouts. And there are some dangerous batters here: Seager, Nola, and of course that Texas weather with the roof, I believe, open again today. At least that's my assumption. And Alex, you can correct me if I'm wrong there. But tell me about Mike Minor here and the idea of a chalk pitcher here in the hot Texas weather after they had that first week where the roof was closed and all of a sudden it was a pitcher's park.
Yeah, I think this Texas park is a lot better for pitchers now. And we see that with the 8.5 over under. Mike Minor, he's a good strikeout pitcher, and the matchup versus Mariners is one that's really paid off, just focusing on that. And then on the other side, I mean, the Texas bats aren't very good. So we got Marco Gonzalez, who's kind of popping as a value pitcher. So I think those are 2 guys to target. And I will just mention we got some NBA news. Trey Burke starting for the Mavs. So that was kind of something unexpected.
Oh, okay. NBA news always important here. As we talked about before the show, if your lineup's been blown up by Russell Westbrook, there are still going to be some opportunities for you to hopefully claw your way back with some of the various games going on later. And that Mavs game does actually matter. So keep that in mind too. So are we... Alex, are you saying that the roof is closed today or is it open? Because I would assumed it was open after it was open, I think yesterday, right? But I don't know. They don't have a resource to check it out like Chase Field, which has it like on our website.
Yeah, my bad. I didn't mean to speculate on the status of the roof.
The roof is on fire. That's the main thing.
But the main thing I'm looking at is the Vegas lines because those guys are so sharp at handicapping the games. And I'm seeing this over-under of 8.5. So that is the lowest on the slate. So
you're right. El Negro Loco, of course, our news god who has a live blog at Awesemo.com that you can check out for the MLB. The roof is closed, he's saying. So I'm incorrect there. I assume. What is the logic behind keeping it open and keeping it closed? And if it was open yesterday, why was it? Whatever.
Well, anyways, this one's simple, man. You close it when you have your ace pitcher on the mound.
That's a fair point. He might have called it a favor, did Mike Minor, to get the numbers looking better. But all right, roof closed there, so that does give you one less reason to perhaps want to go to stacks there. Some other pitching, though, which won't be as dependent upon roofs and weather. So here's a guy we talked about, and I'm curious about your thoughts because weirdly, I feel like we end up with the same pitchers whenever we do a show together. I guess that's the way it times out. Josh Lindblom, again, Alex, popping up to me. He went well for us last time we had him. Now he's facing a Minnesota team who comes with a lot of dangerous power, but does offer some strikeouts here to take advantage of. And Lindblom's looked really good so far. The pitch counts come up. The strikeouts have been there for him in a meaningful way. Is Josh Lindblom once again a value play that you would take going against a much more dangerous team than he faced that last time that he played, where I think he took advantage of a pretty weak team in that last start?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, because, it's twofold. I mean, I got a soft spot for these Korean baseball players after we had that little Korean baseball resurgence. He made his comeback in the MLB this year, so that's kind of cool. He's been good so far, too. That's the more important point, of course. The matchup versus the Twins, that's a tough one, but he's cheap enough that you can definitely justify taking some Lindblom.
But you're not as in love with him as the last time. I guess there's more games, so logically you're not going to be, but is he not jumping out the same way? Because I thought last time we had landed on him, and it seems like now you are not team Lindblom in terms of the waving pom-poms that I have for our pal Josh.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to get enthusiastic about a pitcher who's exciting just because they're cheap. But it's all about the bats that you fit around them. Kind of like Patrick Laird for the Miami Dolphins this year. So I think that it could make sense to just punt twice, go Gonzalez, Lindblom, and then you can get a really stacked team. So there's a lot of ways you can approach this slate because they did a good job of pricing these pitchers where you can hit all these different price points and still have a good lineup.
Okay, so that's a fair point to make there. And yes, certainly some ways to pay down at pitcher today if you're willing to take on a little bit of risk, such as Josh Lindblom going against the Minnesota team who does absolutely rake against both sides of the plate, but this year especially really mashing right-handed pitching for them. The rest of the pitching slate, I'm curious because I'm still going through my crunches, so I haven't landed on some stuff because of some of the projection things. But it does look like we have a pretty good spread of ownership across some guys here. Garrett Richards going to pick up some ownership going against the Dodgers. Ross Stripling also projects for some. Brandon Bielak, I know people in the premium Slack were talking about him this morning, a little enthusiastic or maybe even over enthusiastic about Bielak relative to what he's given us so far. We also have ownership, pretty good amount of ownership, more than Josh Lindblom projected for Zach Wheeler, for Dylan Bundy. I want to go through all these guys because I think there's going to be some tough choices to make here if you are trying to pare that down. And let's go to Dylan Bundy because I want to hear your thoughts about what's going on with him, where he's been an absolute monster here. He always kind of had the potential when he was on the Orioles, but for whatever reason now in the Angels lineup, he's been doing a lot more. But he is going against an Oakland team who does have some dangerous power going against a right-handed pitcher. And Bundy himself, not completely immune to blowups in the past, especially as an Oriole. And this Angels park has been playing pretty hot so far in the year, actually playing pretty hot going back to last year in terms of power as well after they shifted some outfield walls around, excuse me. So how are you feeling about Dylan Bundy here? Because he does look great on the year, 31% K rate, 0.6 whip, faced 80 batters. Going back to last year too, the strikeouts were there from lower 24% K rate, but relative to playing in the Camden Yards, still a pretty good spot for Bundy. I'm intrigued by him, but I don't know that I want to go down with a $9,700 Dylan Bundy. So where do you land with him at about 20% projected ownership?
Yeah, I think that he's having a great year. So no hesitation if you want to go to him. He had a complete game the last time out, so that's always really impressive. That just shows that he's a guy that's going to go a lot deeper than most of the guys on the slate. So that's definitely a plus. The Oakland lineup, though, is not a great matchup. They're just a team that has power. They strike out about average, but the park kind of counteracts that because being on the West Coast, you don't have that same heat as a lot of the country. So I think that he's a good spot for sure, but I think he's going to not really find the optimal lineup construction because he's a little bit too expensive and not quite as good as Scherzer. And then not as good a value as some of the cheaper guys.
So do you believe that gives him a little more reason to go there? Because we do talk often about the concept of paying up to be contrarian, especially here. And I know you've been really great, especially last year on the deeper dive, talking about some of the anti-optimizer plays. He's going to be owned, but does Bundy strike you as being something of an anti-optimizer play with people writing him off because of his Orioles stints and just, the fact that this year is a pretty small sample size, even though he has looked good?
I think it definitely is an anti-optimizer play, and that's not to say it's the best way to be contrarian in the slate because when you pay up at pitcher, it kind of limits the flexibility with the rest of your lineup to be contrarian. So all in all, it's kind of a wash. I try not to stress too much about pitcher ownership because half the time you're going to be pretty happy with what you get and for the price. And that's pretty good.
That seems fair. And it is going to be a pretty decent price on Bundy, but not much more expensive than Mike Minor, and he's going to have less ownership. So certainly one potential leverage play you can make there if you don't want to go Minor's way. Some of these other guys who are going to be pretty chalky, Zach Wheeler going against Baltimore, though, pretty warm day in that area. So could be an issue a little bit for Wheeler cutting through that. And actually part of why I like Philly, even though Alex Cobb has looked a little better this year. But the Zach Wheeler part of the equation is the one we're talking about now. For him, just seems due for positive regression on his strikeout rate. The swing rate for him is in line with where it was previously, 10.9% swing rate for him for the batters going against him. He's got a 10.5% swing strike rate going back to last year. But the strikeout rate from this year, 13%, seems like it's due for better days. And, the Orioles, it's kind of weird because the Orioles, I always think of as being a team, and this might be more of a historical thing, but a team who strikes out a lot, who doesn't have a lot to offer. And only 3 guys above league average here in terms of strikeouts in this lineup. And you do have guys like Hanser Alberto who will drag out an at-bat, just an 8% K rate for him. So where do you land on Wheeler and, all these pitching options? Again, a lot of ownership going to a variety of guys here. But is Wheeler to you with the same tier as these other pitchers that we're going to talk about?
He's a step below Scherzer for sure. And the pricing seems to be that Scherzer's just the top value at the high end. But Wheeler does look like a good play for sure because, as you mentioned, Baltimore is one of the rebuilding teams in the league. As you mentioned, they're not tremendously easy to strike out, but I have them about average. So that's definitely worth taking some looks. It's just that 9,900 for Zach Wheeler. It is a lot more than we're used to paying for him.
Yeah, that is a big price on Wheeler and a hot day as well. And I think that would give me some concern. Although Wheeler, to his credit, not the worst in terms of giving up power. But it does seem, I think with the lefties in particular, maybe a chance here for Wheeler to get dinged up a little. So I would put him a little bit below some of these other guys, but get him in an optimizer. I certainly have no issue because the projection that Alex has on him, not terrible by any stretch, especially for a high price Zach Wheeler there. Some of these other pitchers that we should hit on, Ross Stripling going for the Dodgers against San Diego. And we saw yesterday, Dustin May had another nice outing against San Diego for the most part. These guys are, for San Diego, pretty good hitters for the most part. You have a lot of power hitters in this lineup generally. And of course, Fernando Tatis, a guy who the hype certainly there for him this year. The price as well, now some Mike Trout territories for the most part. But still, Tatis does have a 31% K rate. You have Will Myers in there with a pretty high strikeout rate. 5 guys overall in this lineup who strike out above league average. Stripling, though, not the best strikeout guy in that Dodgers rotation. So I'm not seeing Stripling too much other than the price being appealing. But where do you land with Stripling, Alex, with a pretty good run total as well for San Diego, or low one rather, 3.7 implied runs for San Diego so far?
Yeah, I think that Stripling is a good pitcher. The problem here is that the amount you're paying per pitch as far as salary is the highest probably of anyone because the Dodgers just don't run their starting pitchers very deep compared to other teams. And the Padres they're an up-and-coming team that has some good bats, as you mentioned, not bad for strikeouts. And the park's really good. But overall, I'm just worried about the price being too high for a guy that is probably going to cap out 4 to 5 innings on average.
Yeah, I think that's about how I would land with it too. And I was willing to go to May yesterday because he's been a little more stretched out, been able to go a little bit deeper into games since taking over that spot in the rotation. And Stripling, not sure I have that same confidence, nor honestly the same confidence in his strikeout ability. More of a pitcher who tends to limit damage from where I sit. And this year, only a 22% K rate so far for Stripling. Going back to 24.6%, that is not that much better. Some of the other pitchers that we should hit on, and I know people want to talk, let's skip to this guy because I think people are really curious about him based on what I'm seeing in the YouTube chat. Tyler Alexander made his, I don't think it was a debut, but it did have a start last time out, or a stint last time out where he struck out 10 batters in pretty short form. As a result, his strikeout rate right now is just exorbitant. I think we have him at a 50% K rate overall. Certainly not a number you'd expect to be sustainable, but because of that big outing, Alexander got bumped up to the rotation. Going back to last year, though, numbers not that great. About a league average strikeout pitcher at 23%. Not giving up a ton of power, but definitely not a guy who jumps off the page relative to this 2020 sample size that we have. So Tyler Alexander for you, Alex, is he a guy that you're going to mix in that cheap price tier, or would you rather have the Marco Gonzalez's or Josh Lindblom's?
Tyler Alexander is definitely someone that I like today because, first of all, this game where he pitched to 12 batters and struck out 10 was about 2 weeks ago from what I recall. So let me just pull up this box score so I can state the accurate information here. But first of all, striking out 10 out of 12 guys is not a fluke. That is remarkably unlikely for an average strikeout pitcher. And let's see, he had 55 pitches on August 2nd. So if we give him the benefit of the doubt that he's been training between then and now, then we're looking at maybe 75 pitches. And I'm willing to give him credit for making a big leap in the strikeouts this year. I think that getting 10 out of 12 strikeouts is enough for me to take some chances at that price.
Interesting. So, the White Sox, certainly a team that does have some strikeouts in the mix, though. Also some guys who can make this a pretty tough day for Tyler Alexander right away. You're looking at some righty power here. Edwin Encarnacion would terrify me going up against a lefty pitcher, and Grandal as well to a somewhat lesser extent, Abreu. I think there's enough power there where it'd give me some pause, but at 2% ownership projected. I find it a little hard to believe based on how much I've seen Tyler Alexander talked about in our premium Slack and on this YouTube chat right now. I think that maybe the number will be a little bit higher, but certainly a play. If he stays around even under 10%, I think it's worth having some exposure for sure. He's not going to be a chalk play either way, it seems. Let's keep going through some of the pitchers here, and get a large slate today, 12 games. So help us out and hit that like button, because Lord knows there's a lot to talk about here in every corner of the slate. And Garrett Richards, another guy in that Dodgers matchup. This one, I honestly struggle to see where the ownership is coming from for him. I don't, Richards' strikeout numbers are pretty solid, but it's a Dodgers team that has a ton of dangerous power. And overall, I think I have some concerns with the hard contact that Richards gives up. He's given up about a 47% hard contact rate on the year, 48% going back to last year. Not the biggest sample size for him. So maybe some opportunity in terms of being a cheap guy, but a cheap guy going against the Dodgers with an almost 5-point implied run total. You might have it even a little higher, Alex. I don't see it for Richards, but where do you land with him?
Someone that I think he doesn't stand out as a great value because, as you mentioned, the Dodgers, pretty scary lineup, so you can't really expect them to have a great chance at the win or limiting runs on average. But he is showing that he's made a big leap this year. So I think that the price is reasonable, and I don't really see a ton of value in going there despite that, because the Dodgers aren't going to be super popular today, and there are other good cheap pitchers. I think this range of guys in the low range is just kind of stacked. So there's a lot of guys you can kind of mix and match.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And I definitely wouldn't run away if I got exposure to Richards. But I think for me, I'm not trying to get above the 17% we have projected in terms of ownership. I just don't see it for Richards. And I definitely don't see it for many teams going against the Dodgers. But I think for Richards in particular, I'd rather take some of the other value guys that we've already discussed. But hey, if you get them, no issue there. And for some reason you have a gut feel, bless your heart, going against the Dodgers. Good luck to you tonight. Brandon Bielak, another guy I want to hit on, because another dude who I just feel like I see people talking about a lot. And it's not a perfect science compared to our ownership projections, which of course you can get at awesemo.com/join. But Bielak, certainly a prospect with some notoriety behind him. The strikeout rate for him so far not looking the best this year, but the other stats looking pretty good. A 1.2 whip, not giving up a ton of hits, hasn't given up any home runs yet, and certainly going against a San Francisco Giants team that you have Yastrzemski hitting pretty well in the year, and Austin Slater in a limited sample hitting okay, but really not a lot of guys to be afraid of here. I don't know that I have a ton of confidence in Bielak, but I think I'd prefer him to a guy like Garrett Richards personally, just because you're going against San Francisco with a 3.9 point implied run total. But where are you landing with Bielak? Because the numbers so far in the majors aren't great, but I know you do incorporate your minor stats, and Bielak maybe looks a little better there.
Yeah, for sure. I think that based on his minor league stats, 24% K rate in AAA last year, we can expect about league average strikeouts in the major leagues. And over the first 3 games he's pitched in, he's at 17%. So I expect that to go up a little bit. So yeah, the matchup is nice versus San Francisco. So that definitely is a positive, but I just I don't see a ton of value at that price to 7,500, given that he's just an average pitcher and the Giants don't really strike out at a high rate.
Yeah, pretty decent chance of getting a win here with the minus 166 money line on him, which is one of the better numbers on the day. So I guess he has that going for him that some of these other cheap guys may not have quite as well, especially Garrett Richards. Again, I don't mean to beat up on old Garrett Richards, but just to me, I don't see him being on the same tier as some of these other guys. But yeah, I'm with you on Bielak. I don't, I think he's going to have better days. I just don't know this one against the Giants is one that I would want to have a ton of stock in. I think to me, that's one where he just needs to hang in and, hopefully have a decent outing where he pitches deeper into that game and gets the outs rather than expecting him to get a ton of strikeouts. You mentioned Marco. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Let's talk about this money line thing, because I think this is important, because the money line obviously does represent what are the chances the pitcher will do better than the other pitcher tonight. So that has a lot of value. But from a projection standpoint, having maybe a 20% higher chance of getting a win like the win's only 3 points, so that's only 0.6 points on average. And you got to assume that if your pitcher is having an outlier performance, they're going to be more likely to get the win anyway. So that's not like a huge factor in how I choose my pitchers.
Yeah, no, it seems fair. I think I was just struggling to find something nice to say about him, but I think that the way you explained that makes a lot of sense, and certainly something to keep in mind here, because I do think I agree, people do tend to overvalue the win thing, including myself, because I definitely just said that because I know people overvalue the win thing.
Well, I wasn't talking to you. I was talking to everyone watching, because I always notice that these kind of poor pitchers with a good money line do get a lot of ownership, and to me, that is a spot where you can exploit it just by not having them.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. It's certainly something to keep in mind here for MLB DFS, where sometimes, just people trusting something a little bit too much, like a money line, can be a difference between a profitable night and one that's not. Keep in mind, easier to profit on Yahoo, where you're playing your baseball games on there, especially with the YSRPs. You're basically profiting the second you deposit over on Yahoo. So make sure you're using that promo code AWESEMO and get your $30 in YSRPs by using that promo code over at Yahoo. Got to make sure they get their love today.
Dude, that was seamless. I got to throw some love to Yahoo too, because I had my first GPP win on Yahoo. It was a 5K to first in baseball. And I had J.R. Murphy as my contrarian part of the Yankee stack, and he hit a homer that day. So I have fond memories.
There you go. So only good things over at Yahoo. And The Color Purple. I mean, a beautiful movie starring Oprah and a beautiful way to design your website, I would say. So make sure to check out Yahoo and use that promo code Awesemo. Rest of the pitching slate here, I'm going to go through. We're going to do home run picks in a second, but let me see if there's anybody else who really jumps out meaningfully to me. I guess Jordan Montgomery, we talked about him, I think one of the last shows we had. He got blown up again in that start. He doesn't do well so far against righties, which he's going to face a lot of as a left-handed pitcher, so that doesn't look great. On the year so far, a 6.4 whip against righties, a 2 whip, a 6.4 xFIP, and a 384 ISO given up to righties thus far for him. I was actually already stacking some Braves up and had some lineups with Acuna from before we started the show that I'm going to be taking out here, but still a lot of righty power even without Acuna in that lineup. Adam Duvall's been a lefty master when he's faced them over the last year and change. A lot of these guys really do have pretty good splits against left-handed pitching, maybe besides Freddie Freeman, who's still a perfectly fine hitter against lefties as well. So I don't like Jordan Montgomery at all, and maybe I'll just keep saying this until he goes back down to the minors, but I just don't see anything here that gives me a lot of signs of life unless he's facing a lineup full of lefties, and he's not going to do that. So I don't like Jordan Montgomery at all. I won't have any, but where do you land with him?
Yeah, I agree. I think that he's probably not a great play today because none of the factors are really working. Where he's in Yankee Stadium, that's a batter's park, and he's facing a tough team in Atlanta. No Acuna, which is not quite as scary, but still a solid team. So definitely not a guy I'm targeting today.
Yeah, so there we go. That's a Jordan Montgomery take for the show. And look, there'll be a day where he makes me look stupid, but I think thus far I am just baffled by this guy being somebody who was a prospect that I know as somebody who grew up in New York and is technically, I guess, a lapsed Yankees fan. I've heard so much hype for Jordan Montgomery, and he has had none of it so far in his major stints.
Well, he's good at strikeouts. I mean, and that goes a long way in fantasy. It just doesn't seem like a great day to target him.
Yeah, and then strikeouts, I mean, definitely due for some positive regression, but on the year, just not looking good for him. And going back to last year, too, he was only an 18% K rate guy, though small sample size, so that'll certainly take a jump up. It's the halfway point of the show, and, dong picks now, unfortunately, not, the salad days of dong picks may be gone because we have so many different live before lock crews doing their own things, and it's a great thing here on this channel, so you get different takes rather than just the same guys here like we've had sometimes, myself included, giving opinions every day. But the dong picks, I'm going to do it whenever I'm hosting a show for however long that's going to be. And I think that there are some interesting picks to make today, Alex. Some guys who look good. Of course, we don't go to Coors Field for this game, but I will let you make your first pick here, and hopefully you can get one here after I think we both are on the offer on the year for the dong picks.
Well, I got my last one and Chris did Yelich, so I had a lot of luck going to the studs. So I'll just keep it rolling, man. I was watching the Angels game at the end, and I mean, Mike Trout, he just it seems like he's hitting these home runs left and right. So I'm gonna go out on a limb and take a chance on Mike Trout. I know that's one of your favorite moves.
I love that. I love the way that you couch it. Everything about that pick works for me. Mike Trout talked yesterday about how he's got some dad strength going for himself. So I think it's also a fun narrative for him to have. I have no debate with that one. I think I'm going to stick with Mike. Oh, God. If Alex Cobb is actually good now after being not good at all last year, I'm going to be pretty bummed. But I'm going to take a Phillies hitter and go against Alex Cobb here, who gives up a 500 ISO to righties going back to last season. And I'm going to take, I've taken Rhys Hoskins once and it didn't work out, but I'll go back to Rhys Hoskins again. I just like Rhys, and his power hasn't been here to start the year. I don't even think he has a single home run actually to start the year, but that's got to end at some point, right, Alex? That's how this works.
I mean, that's what happened with Yelich. Sometimes you just give him that good luck and motivation when you're dying on the day.
Yeah, positive vibes for Rhys Hoskins today, please, from everybody. No besmirching his good name. Our boy Andrew Mocht, who's been diligent in the fight against Max Stassi and his perhaps performance-enhancing drugs, advocating for him. He's in the lineup? No, he's not even in the lineup. That'd be a terrible pick. Why would I pick him? Don't try to trick me here, Andrew Mock. And hit the like button, guys. We're heading into the hitting part of the slate, which, of course, is the most fun one. So make sure that you hit that like button so we can make sure that we have all the stacks as good as can be when we talk about them coming up here. And the top stacks tool I'm updating in my sheet right now, but of course you should be having that as part of your process every day. You can see the ownership, the chances of being a top stack. And it's a tool that Alex himself lovingly crafted. And it's an important thing to keep in mind because if you're a person who comes onto the stream, you have a tough day at work. MLB can be a tough grind, especially after you played NBA today. There's a lot of sports going on. So the top stacks tool really does shorten that process up for you and give you a good chance to see how things look on a slate without even making a single lineup. So give it a shot here if you haven't checked it out yet. But Alex, we do have one team who's the clear front runner to be the top stack today. The issue with them is that their ownership is pretty high. It's come down a little bit relative to where it was earlier, but Arizona going against Kyle Freeland. He is a pitcher who has not shown much in any way. And he's playing at Coors, so that's not a great sign either. But Arizona going to be a little bit owned higher than their chance of being the top stack. We have them at about 11% chance of being the top stack on the day. They're going to be about 15%, a little bit higher than that. So Alex, how are you approaching Arizona today? Are they a team you're willing to get away from here? Or is the difference between the ownership and chance of being a top stack now close enough where maybe you're still getting there around where you normally would?
I think, I think that Arizona, certainly I wouldn't judge anyone if they went to the chalk stack of the day. But what I'd point out is that the team total for them is only 6.1. Kyle Freeland is about a league average pitcher. He has, I guess last year he was pretty bad, 5 xFIP. Over 3 stars, 4.3 xFIP this year. So not if you go off that 4.3 number, which I mean, it's a small sample, but the 6-team total just isn't quite as high as you see in Coors a lot, 11 over under for the game. So it just doesn't seem like it's an exceptionally great time to target the game. But everyone is going there. So on DraftKings, 15% of all the ownership is on there, and FanDuel about the same. And you got to consider the fact that you can only pick 4 to 5 batters from each from a team out of 9. So like the number of people stacking or having some piece of that is probably going to be about double that. So you're competing with like a third of lineups if you have the Arizona guys.
So there's a lot of lineups you'll be right next to there and holding hands with. I would say if you were going to go to Arizona, I think putting in Nick Ahmed is not a bad move. He's a guy who's been something of a cheat code against left-handed pitching for a while now, hitting at the bottom of the order. And I'm saying this is a move that I've actually made quite a few times in the past with Ahmed and been pleasantly surprised when he does get some action going. But he's going to be under 5% owned, so maybe that's one way to get different here. But as Alex mentioned, the rest of that stack, very highly owned. Carson Kelly in particular, a nice value play, who's also hit lefties pretty well. He's still a guy that's going to be very highly owned today thanks to that value that he has. And as Alex mentioned earlier, Andy Young, another guy. Actually, this is a good question for you, Alex, because I'm curious how you handle this, where Andy Young's clearly a good value, not the best track record, certainly, or not the longest track record to look at. But would he be, if you were to go to this Arizona stack, would he be like the first guy you would try to cut out because he's going to be very popular hitting that leadoff spot with a very cheap price?
I think I would probably have him a lot in my Arizona stacks because he just helps you get to pitchers that are better. So I don't mind getting a little bit more chalky as a trade-off. But yeah, I think he's going to be really popular as a one-off and a part of a stack. Now, I haven't been following this super closely, but you got to think that a guy like Andy Young, who isn't really pulling up his stats right now, but he's a rookie this year. He projects to be about an average player this year. You'd think that maybe there's a higher chance that he gets pulled for someone else. So that could be a way that it could really work out spectacularly for you if you fade him.
Interesting move. Yeah, I think that makes some sense here. And Andy Young, again, not the largest sample size, and there are some guys they can go to off the bench. Cole Calhoun, not in the starting lineup. And maybe if you do see a righty out of the bullpen, you could see Cole come into that lineup in his usual leadoff spot. So definitely some ways to get different there. Here's another team who is in the same ball game here going to Colorado. They actually project to be a much better chance of being a top stack relative to their ownership compared to Arizona. Not quite as owned for Colorado, though it makes sense given the fact that price for them is really onerous. I mean, you have Trevor Story over 6K, Blackmon over 6K, Arenado over 6K. And they're also going against a guy in Zach Gallen, who was acquired by Arizona last year and been quietly really good, and a guy that I feel like people generally don't respect very much. A 29% K rate going back to last season, 31% K rate this year. Still a guy, though, who does give up some hard contact. The barrel ball rate for him at 11% this year. So guys have been making some good contact when not striking out. Colorado, though, Alex, they look good on the top stacks tool, and it does seem like there's only ownership really going to Garrett Hampson and Trevor Story in an appreciable way. So how are you handling Colorado, and are you getting 5-man stacks of them? Because it does seem like they're not naturally occurring very much in the optimizers.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, I think that you nailed it, where it's like the top 4 guys in the lineup are getting ownership and no one really else is. So that seems like a good opportunity to take a couple of those guys and match them with some guys that are lower owned to make a nice lineup. So that's definitely going to be something I'm doing tonight.
Yeah, so Colorado, worth noting because they are just not going to be owned. And again, you could pay that premium price tag. And if these guys do go off, especially Story, Blackmon, Arenado, or Blackmon and Arenado in particular, because Story is going to be mostly appropriately owned. These guys have a ceiling, I would say, as high as anybody on the slate, maybe besides Mike Trout and his dad's strength, but we'll find out today. We didn't talk about Gallen at all at pitcher, Alex, but going to Coors can be a contrarian move if you have a good pitcher. Did not pay out yesterday for Robbie Ray if you did go his way, but still Zach Gallen's been good enough where I have to ask the question: would you get any Zach Gallen exposure at literally no ownership going against Colorado?
It's not terrible because he does have pretty good strikeouts, but the strikeouts are decreased in Coors because of the lower air densities, so definitely not a guy that I'm going to be really looking at because there are a lot of cheaper guys that have similar projections today.
No, that makes sense. And definitely a lot of risk. As we saw yesterday, Robbie Ray actually was like hanging in there by a thread after giving up some home runs early. And then it just went terribly, terribly for him, as will happen many times at Coors. So that's the nature of the beast. Let's keep going through these hitting slates. And there isn't a team that really jumps out to me stack-wise looking at the top stacks tool, Alex, because we have a lot of people here who have a decent chance of being a top stack, are under-owned. Houston, always a team that it does feel like has a better chance to be a top stack relative to their ownership. But does one of these stacks jump out to you as being, one that you would really try to build around today in a meaningful way? Or given the size of the slate, are you just mostly spreading it around because it seems like it's more of a slate to spread it around?
I think given the pitchers today, that one thing that's kind of intriguing is just kind of punting at pitcher on DraftKings twice. I mean, on FanDuel, you could do one punt pitcher, I guess, but it's not as contrarian. But that lets you get 2 kind of good but not elite stacks that might not be heavily owned. So Houston's example, where they don't really stand out as a exceptional play today. Tyler Anderson's, I guess he's okay. They're at home, so that's a negative factor. But but they're not going to be heavily owned. And that's the most important thing. So like a team like that and Colorado, for example, like maybe you can make a lineup with 2 stacks. And if you happen to get those 2 right, then you're going to have a pairing that's not going to be owned by very many people.
No, that makes sense. And yeah, Houston, a team that we've seen time and again. I think this year too, I feel like I've seen enough people really bashing Houston, but if you look at their numbers on the year, I mean, they're hitting pitching about as well as they did last year for the most part as a team. And, left-hand pitching especially, this team has a 213 ISO. This lineup they have out there today has a 213 ISO on the year. There's a lot of guys who are going to do damage. And Tyler Anderson, I think you were very generous in your breakdown of him. Going back to last year, he looks like the worst pitcher on the slate, giving up a lot of contact to lefties, even giving up a 385 ISO to lefties, 263 to righties. So if Houston does go off there, despite the tough park, they are not going to be owned. Really, the only guy looks like he's picking up ownership is Jose Altuve. So definitely one way to go. The other top stacks, and I'm actually kind of surprised by this one, though I guess I'm getting them as I'm making my final optimizations here. But Tampa Bay going against Martin Perez seems pretty loftily owned. It seems like very much, we talk about the anti-optimizer play. It does seem like Tampa Bay is kind of the optimizer play going against Perez. A lot of guys here who can do damage against a left-handed pitcher up top, which definitely makes it easy to go to, and really cheap prices for guys like Mike Brosseau, Yandy Diaz up top as well, which are going to make them very chalky. Hunter Renfroe as well, one of the top-owned plays on the day, which, as we know, not a great spot to be usually for a position player. But how are you feeling about this Tampa Bay stack, Alex? Because based on the ownership, I would think you either want to not go to Renfroe especially, but maybe you want to skip Renfroe, Brosseau, and Diaz. And if you are going to go here, but I don't know that you want to go here at all if you take those guys out.
Yeah, I think that I'm glad you brought up the Rays because it seems like they're probably like the best overall stack aside from Arizona today because like they are so cheap and they also have a really high team total. And we talk a lot about maybe fading teams that have a higher ownership than the top stack percentage. But when I really like to do that is for our teams that aren't very highly projected but have a lot of ownership just because they're really cheap. An example of that today is the Tigers. Now, the Tigers, they're facing Gio Gonzalez, who he's been a mediocre pitcher like for years, so nothing really exciting there. But it's just like they have guys that are like 2 to 3K batting in the heart of the order. And that's going to really pop in people's lineups when they have a Scherzer and Colorado stack maybe, or Arizona. So that would be a team that I would consider all out fading. But Tampa Bay with a much higher projection in a pretty good park in Fenway versus average pitcher Martin Perez, that's something I'm interested in.
Interesting. So you would give yourself a little bit of wiggle room then relative to the top stacks tool if you have a team like Tampa Bay who has the value pricing and also good projections. Like that's the one time you would probably deviate a little from the leverage plays we normally talk about the top stacks. For sure.
Yeah. I mean, like it's really smart in baseball to fade bad plays that are highly owned or bad like projected stacks because the probability that they're going to have a big day is so low. That's true to some extent for a good stack like Tampa Bay because like the chance of an outlier performance in baseball, which you need to win your tournament, it is still pretty low, but it's a lot higher. So I'll be mixing them in. They're probably not going to be my favorite team though.
Got it. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And yeah, as Alex mentioned, there is a good amount of ownership on there. So definitely some reasons to move away. But as we learned, maybe some more reason to go there than playing it straight as we normally do here with the top stacks tool. Got to keep going through the stacks here, guys. Hit the like button. We got about 20 minutes left before lock. So please make sure you're hitting that like button if you're here because it helps us out quite a bunch, just being seen by more people on YouTube. And that's an important part. Spencer saying happy birthday, Spags. It is not my birthday, but thank you. I'll take that. We can always celebrate my birthday if you want. Yeah, but not till October. So unfortunately, you're missing out. Other stacks here that I'm curious your thoughts about. The White Sox, we talked about Tyler Alexander. They're another team who does look to have a good chance of being a top stack, but also look a little bit over-owned relative to that chance of being the top stack. We have them at about 8% ownership, but a 5% chance of being the top stack, 5.7%. So where are you landing with them going against Tyler Alexander, given that we did extol his virtues, but certainly a pitcher who can be volatile and maybe even end up higher owned than we project right now?
Yeah, I think that the White Sox are a really talented team with a lot of like younger guys that any given night they could break the slate for sure. I mean, when you got guys like Luis Robert batting 7th, that just shows like how good the lineup is. So the differential in ownership versus their chance of being like one of the best teams tonight isn't huge. So they're a team that I'll probably have exposure to. But if you are picking White Sox, maybe you want to make a couple decisions in your lineup that other people won't.
Yeah, no, it seems like a fair approach. And as Alex mentioned previously on these shows, not as much value going against a pitcher who has ownership as there is going to a pitcher against, you know what I'm saying. We've done this before, but not as much value going with a stack against the pitcher with some ownership. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Let's keep going through some of these other teams that are worth hitting on and check to see if there's any requests from the chat, but nobody asking anything specific. It does seem like the Yankees have a pretty good shot here going against Suki Toussaint of being a top stack relative to their ownership. And I'm not sure why the Yankees are mostly being overlooked. As you mentioned, they are playing in Yankee Stadium. It's a pretty humid day over in New York as well. No Giancarlo Stanton, so maybe that makes people fall asleep a little bit mentally there. But every guy in this lineup can do damage for the most part, especially against a righty. And, even DJ LeMahieu, for as much as Yankee fans overrate him and his price is always a little bit too high, he is able to get on base and able to do some damage against righties. I like this Yankee stack. I didn't get there as much as I would like there. I think I'm actually going to try to change that a little now that I'm looking at it. But how do you feel about the Yankees as a stack here that has really no ownership on them, despite the fact that they are the Bronx Bombers for a reason?
I like them. I think they're going to be a team that doesn't really pop in ownership or projection today because they're facing Suki Toussaint. But the conditions look good. It's about 80 degrees in New York, and it's a batter's park. So if they get off to a hot start, they're going to be facing a lot worse pitchers. So that definitely bodes well for them.
That makes sense. We got a question here in the YouTube chat from our old pal, Jeremiah Johnson. And I'll take some questions from the Slack, too, to make sure that we're covering all the things that you guys want to know. But he's asking, which stack would be your favorite, Alex, if you were to start a lineup in a single entry on FanDuel? Is there anybody who jumps out for you as being particularly worthwhile for that FanDuel exposure as a stack in a single entry?
Let me take another look here. Sorry, I'm getting disorganized. Not League of Legends top stacks.
I would play, honestly, I would play OMG. I would play whoever.
All right, on FanDuel, I'm glad you asked because there are different stacks that are going to pop on FanDuel. So looks like the Nationals and Braves look like maybe contrarian stacks that you can go to.
There you go. And the Braves, an interesting team as for the reasons we talked about. I will certainly co-sign on any Braves exposure that you get here going against stupid Jordan Montgomery, who's not looked good at all. Checking the questions here. Uncle DFS at some point saying that Max Kepler ruined his swing and has lost his confidence at the plate. So Uncle DFS knows what he's talking about. So keep that in mind if you're playing a lot of Kepler today. El Negro Loco did pick Alex Bregman for the home run today. So I'll put him down for that, even though we're not keeping track of these. So this is El Negro Loco. All your good picks are going to waste, but I did put it on the sheet for you. Makad asking for the top pitcher according to our old Paul Blackburn standards here. He's suggesting Kyle Freeland there. I'll just ask you this, Alex. We're going to keep talking hitters and whatever questions people have, but did you get any Kyle Freeland at all at pitcher today?
I'm not about Kyle Freeland today. I mean, going to a pitcher in Coors, that's certainly contrarian, but never go full contrarian.
Yeah, the Kyle Freeland, not a guy who jumps out to me, especially on a slate where we've talked about having some reason to go to Marco Gonzalez with the roof closed in Texas, having some reason to go to Josh Lindblom, based upon what we've seen. I think there are some other guys who technically qualify as cheap / vaguely crappy pitchers you can go to instead of Kyle Freeland in the spot that comes with a lot of risk and probably not with enough strikeout upside to justify the risk. Keekster says that he tweeted Martin Perez today that he would pitch 6 shutout innings and he liked it. So watch out. So Martin Perez, a leverage play for you, Alex, based upon this feedback from Keekster and the social media interactions that Martin Perez has?
I mean, it's always important to reevaluate your assumptions. And given that Martin Perez has all this encouragement, which he wouldn't be getting because there are no fans at the stadium and that piped in audience noise doesn't do the trick. I mean, this is a game changer.
Martin Perez, people forget maybe that he had that hot start last year. I mean, I'm not playing Martin Perez today, but remember when we were like, I feel like we did shows where we're like, what happened to Martin Perez where he's good all of a sudden and now he's back to being old mediocre Martin. But yeah, maybe there's hope for him going against Tampa Bay. I don't see it though. I guess actually 7 guys above league average in strikeout rate in that lineup though for Tampa Bay. So yeah, sure. Yeah, not a lot of reason to go in there, but why not? Let's see here. Any other stacks, Alex, you're doing? I know you're doing your final crunches here, but anything you're seeing that you have an appreciable amount of that you didn't expect maybe coming into this this final crunch?
Oh man, I'm about to upload some lineups to FanDuel, so I'll be able to tell you in a couple minutes here.
And so we'll circle back here for all the FanDuel people. And of course, I'll check in on some of Alex's exposures as we go. Let's see. Any good questions? People asking again about Tyler Alexander. I'm telling this is one of my tells that Alex, you're getting your feet wet here with Live Before Lock shows. You've been dying to plunge in here during the quarantine times. Whenever anybody mentions pitchers times in chat, just bump their ownership 10%. I feel like it's always the move that I've observed.
Yeah, I think that maybe he's not going to be as sneaky as we hoped.
No, Tyler. And Alex talked about him earlier. I think you found that Tyler Alexander does have some upside, but certainly some chance here of being owned with people dying to roster a guy who had 10 strikeouts last time or this year.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I mean, like, no one knows who this guy is, but his game log shows 10 strikeouts. So maybe that will be enough to move the ownership. And it's always important to use that kind of insight to figuring out what his ownership's going to land at.
Yeah, interesting call by the people out there wanting Tyler Alexander. Usually the rookie of the year scenario that we saw in that movie doesn't happen too often in real life where a guy just comes in and is all of a sudden a beast, but maybe Tyler Alexander is the exception to the rule there. Somebody asking about Oakland stacks going against Dylan Bundy in the YouTube chat here, specifically for a FanDuel single entry. Gage is asking in the YouTube chat. I thought about that earlier, given the fact that Bundy, I have some question marks, as we talked about in the first half of the show, that I'm just not sure that he can fully have turned the switch as much as he has so far, though. The raw potential for him has always been there. And, going back to last year, the swinging strike rate, another stat that I think is a good predictor of what's to come for strikeouts, 13% swinging strike rate for him going back to last year. This year, he's at 14.6%. So it's not some crazy jump. His chase rate as well, 36% going back to last year, 37% this year. So Bundy, it does seem like the numbers are viable, even if they do tend to, level out a little bit more. He's not going to have a 0.6 whip all year. But Alex, do you see value going to Oakland here against Dylan Bundy for a full stack? Because with their prices, I feel like a 3-man stack I could do, but a 5-man, maybe that's the reason why you go to a 5-man.
Well, I think that Dylan Bundy is pretty scary as far as the matchup, and the Angels Stadium isn't really favorable either. So, I mean, I think Oakland has a lot of talent, and they're a team that has a lot of power, so they can really break the slate, but I don't know if I want to get there today because it just doesn't seem like enough factors are going in their favor.
Yeah, not a great run total for Oakland. And as Alex mentioned, the LA weather, not necessarily, or Anaheim weather, they're not actually in LA. I could say that as somebody who actually lives in LA. Definitely not a team that I would think gets a lot of weather boost. Some of the other more humid areas on the East Coast that are hot and humid, or even Colorado, where it's both.
Thanks for mansplaining that for us, man.
What was that? That was like the Cloverfield camera for you. That's shaky.
Yeah, my bad. My setup today isn't nearly as good as normal.
But that's what happens when you're a wingman. You just got to fly by the seat of your pants sometimes. That's what your pilot needs. You guys got 9 minutes left to lock, so start to get all of your lineups in if you can. Make sure you got your final crunches, everything lined up. Check the top stacks tool, of course, that you get at that Awesemo.com membership. Awesemo Plus, go to Awesemo.com/join and then get an MLB package if you haven't yet. Or get a full sport package because I know I've been playing like every sport possible over the last couple of weeks. Alex always does too. And the more slates you play, the better chance to win you'll have generally, as long as you're playing within your bankroll. So play smart, but play a lot of sports. Let's keep going through. I'm checking for any questions. Somebody wants to know about Boston, the other side of the equation here, going against Tampa Bay. 5-point implied run total for Boston as well. It does seem perhaps, a bullpen day for Tampa Bay. Not usually the thing that I think we're all jonesing for. But Boston, a team very capable of being an outlier here. Ownership, though, pretty solid for them, it looks like, especially guys like Verdugo, Benintendi, JD Martinez around 10% on DraftKings. Are you getting a good amount of Boston or any Boston at all, Alex?
I'm not quite sure. I'm running behind on these crunches here, so I haven't really fully been able to see who I ended up with. But I like the stadium, so I could definitely see having Boston, even though it might not be the optimal day to have them.
Yeah, there you go. And that's they're owned appropriately, it seems, for a team with a 5-point implied run total. And we'll keep taking your questions here, but never a bad camera mount here.
This is really showing you my process live here.
Good thing you're wearing pants. That would have been
well, yeah. Don't rewind the feed here.
Again, a question here about the Cleveland bats. I think I'm a little more intrigued by the Cubs side of the equation than the Cleveland side, going against Plutko, a dude who does get hit pretty hard, though for whatever reason doesn't get hit very often. Gets hit hard when he does get hit, and besides that, doesn't get hit very often. But I didn't get much Cleveland here going against John Lester. Lester's numbers on the year are just weird. He's got a 0.6 whip, but a 5.5 xFIP, and also a very low strikeout rate. But it seems like things are due for Lester to fall off the cliff. So I do get why you'd want to go to Cleveland. Weather there also not the hottest in the world, but I could see going to Cleveland, I guess, now that I'm looking at it. I just didn't make that move myself. But Alex, do you see any appeal in particular going to Cleveland? I guess another team is going to be pretty low owned besides the Ginger Assassin Jordan Luplow at minimum price.
Yeah, I mean, they're a great team. So definitely, I'm not giving you my full analysis because I'm trying to scramble here, but let me pull my notes.
They're in play.
All right, Cleveland. Yeah, John Lester is definitely not a pitcher to be scared of these days. So that's a positive factor. But the team total is still really low at 4.8. So that is pretty concerning, especially given the prices of these guys. So let me check the weather, which is usually the reason. It's actually 80 degrees. So I'm not exactly sure. I guess that they must really think Lester is having a comeback year.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, just looking at the numbers, I think he's been getting lucky, and his swinging strike rate really low. Like, guys are making contact. His BABIP is also extremely low, a 0.09 BABIP for him compared to a 0.33 going back to last year. So, sometimes guys get lucky and they look better than they actually are. And I think that would be the case for John Lester. But I agree, the implied runs here are not the highest. So that's one thing to keep in mind here as you're starting to make your lineups. While Alex makes his lineups here, so we won't ask him too many questions, so we can focus on the important, keeping all of us fed here at Awesemo.com. SJM asking Wheeler or Bundy for a cash SP2. Ooh, that is a tough choice. I would think the cash play would be Wheeler because of the implied total and going against Baltimore. But between those two, Alex, do you have a lean for cash between Bundy and Zach Wheeler?
So I just go with the higher projected one in my projections. I'm not really worried about the money line per se because really strikeouts are the most consistent way of scoring. Zach Wheeler, I have about 6 strikeouts, and Bundy, let's see. I have him at 6 as well. So
Flip a coin.
Yeah.
Yes, you have the projections too. You have Wheeler at 17.3, Bundy at 17.4. So yeah, I my lean would be Wheeler, but the projections are the projections for a reason. So 0.1 in favor of Bundy, it would seem. Let's see here, looking at all the questions. People getting weird in the chat. I appreciate you chat when you get weird, as always. I feel like MMA chat's always the weirdest chat I see, but one of my favorites. I feel like Jason and Pete always cracking up over it when I'm watching the shows. Let's see. I'd play Cleveland just because the Cubs pen is bad. Yeah, I mean, Alex has talked about that before. That's not necessarily the best reason to select a team because better hitters are going to get better pitchers out of the bullpen for the most part. So keep that in mind.
Well, I think it's more that like one of your stacks going off, like they're going to face the worst pitchers of whatever bullpen the team is. And those pitchers usually don't differ in talent that much from team to team. They're usually not good. Like just the guys who will balk and lose the games.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I'm looking through the rest of the stuff here. Marco Gonzalez also, now I'm looking at his numbers. He's also been kind of lucky. We know he sucks, so that's fine. We know Marco stinks. You're playing him because he's cheap and that he might survive today. That's why you're playing Marco. So I'm just gonna stick with my Marco exposure and not question it. Andy Young versus Eduardo Escobar on DK for the same price. Man, they're both in the same position as well. So that is a choice that you'll have to make if you do go to that Arizona stack that we talked about earlier, which the best chance of being a top stack today, but definitely going to be over-owned relative to that chance of being a top stack. So keep that in mind if you are getting a lot of Arizona exposure. It does look like ownership-wise, Escobar is going to be less owned. So I would go Escobar. But Alex, do you agree with that here, that you go Escobar over Young because they're at the same price and one is a little bit under-owned relative to the other?
Man, I totally was not paying attention. Sorry about that.
I think that means that Alex agrees. Escobar,
yes,
Escobar or Young at the same price. Yeah. The projection, the projection does favor Andy Young though, but I think the ownership, I would take the less ownership if you are stacking those guys up. If it were me. I need 3 homer calls for the home run challenge on FanDuel. Hook me up real quick. Well, our home run picks for the day, I picked Rhys Hoskins, Alex picked Mike Trout, and El Negro Loco picked Alex Bregman. So our home run picks, well, actually, Alex and mine have not been the best thus far in our shows. You got to get at bats in the home run game. That's the issue. If you're not playing every day, you're not doing it right. El Negro Loco's been great. So definitely take Alex Bregman to the bank would be what I would suggest. Trout hit fires really well. Don't look at BVP. Don't do it. Don't tempt yourself. It's not as useful of a stat as you think. Let's see. Anything else good in the Slack? Checking the Slack one more time for any last minute questions here. How do I not go full contrarian? Elusive Smoke asks. I would think, well, the Marlins aren't on the slate, so I guess you probably can't go full contrarian today. Would be my guess.
Well, the Mets are my clear fade of the day because they actually have some ownership, and you'd think that going up against Scherzer, like they'd be alone, but they actually are picking up some ownership. So that's interesting.
People love picking up hitters against a top pitcher on the slate, even though it works out sometimes, but not as often as people seem to treat it like it does. Especially a guy like Scherzer too, who's just a monster. So. That'd be something to keep in mind here. Seconds left to lock, guys. If you haven't got your lineups in, make sure you do it now because otherwise you are going to be screwed on today's slate. So hit that like button and celebrate getting your lineups in because we are locked. One last bit of housekeeping here, which I'm putting at the end of the show, but I got the clear from our higher ups today. This is my last week of shows here at Awesemo, guys, and I got Awesemo himself here too. So to extol all my virtues, I'm going to say this, but this is my final day is going to be Friday. We're going to have a special week of shows here, and Friday in particular seems like we're going to have a special NBA show and maybe even a post-game show there. But this is it, guys. 4 more days of me here on Live Before Lock. Tomorrow NBA, get Alex again on Thursday. Friday NBA again. So that's my one thing here. I'll tell you guys about where I'm going at the end of the week, but it's been an awesome stretch here. 2.5 years for me with Alex and Tom and Eddie and all of our guys behind the scenes. And it's honestly really sad for me, and kind of why I'm a little flustered today is just I realize that I have to talk about it today. But it's going to be a weird week here for me. So you see me get emotional and stuff. That's why. And it's not my birthday, but I do have something to celebrate. So got something cool to go. And And Alex, anything you want to say great about me?
Yeah, I want to say all the great things about you. I mean, you've been really great on all these shows and all the other content you do. So really appreciate that. And we're glad that we have 5 more days out of you, because we're going to milk you for all your picks this week so we can get that last bit of winnings before you leave.
No, it's a very sad time for me and real tough. But I had to put the announcement out there and waited, till everybody felt like it was the time to do it. But it's going to be weird. It's going to be some new, we have a lot of new blood in this channel, thanks in part because of the work that Alex and Tom and all of our guys behind the scenes have done, helping staff up this company and make it so we don't have to rely just on me, Josh, Jake, Laffy, Adam, all the guys. We have a lot of great people here. So I'm excited for the future, and I'm excited to keep watching this channel, whether I'm working here or not. But it's this is a big week for me. So keep tuning in, watch all the shows, especially subscribe, hit the notification bell so you can see whenever I'll be live. NBA tomorrow, MLB one more time with Alex on Thursday, and I'll be closing it out with our NBA regular season finale on Friday. So watch my shows, please, and follow me at Chris Spags so you can know all the stuff I do next. But more importantly, go check out Yahoo Sports. That's what I want to do here. I have one request for you, not to follow me. My request is you go to Yahoo Sports right now and play some MLB. Use the promo code Awesemo to get yourself $30 in YSRPs with your deposits on there. It's a great thing to do for yourself, for your bankroll. Play on a site that's got a little bit less sharks in the water. Always a good move. And that's what I would advocate for you as my final act here. And also I'd advocate you go to awesemo.com/join. I don't mean to give you too many requests here for you to handle on my last week, but I want you guys to get that Awesemo Plus membership, get all the data that I've been using to make my life better, to understand sports better, to be able to tackle some more, hopefully some more challenges out there in the world of breaking down sports. So really the Awesemo tools are going to be the best thing for you. And I say that, as somebody who has used them and learned the sport as well, and learned every sport as much as I can because of them. So please go to awesemo.com/join. And Alex, any plugs you want to hit here before we call it quits?
Yeah, just Spags. I mean, I'm sure everyone, it's going to take a while to really fully grasp with this this news you're giving out here, but we're going to miss you. And as well, Yahoo Sports, the greatest place to play MLB DFS.
They specifically requested I leave before they would come on as a sponsor. That's the tough part. No, we love Yahoo, and I love this channel. So subscribe, hit the notification bell, watch all the content, hang out with me for the next few shows, and I'll be back tomorrow for more NBA and early in the morning, I believe, with Adam. So ship my money and me coming back. So hey, watch everything, enjoy your MLB slates, watch the news, and be back with you guys again soon. So good luck.